On today's show, Quin Snyder is now officially in place as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks, and I am joined on today's show by Glen Willis of Peachtree Hoops to talk about all kinds of things for the Hawks, Snyder's introduction, as well as what's to come next for the Hawks on offense, on defense, scheme-wise, interpersonal relationships, all that fun stuff, and a fun conversation to be had coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1421 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening after a very busy stretch for the Atlanta Hawks, and I am joined on today's podcast by my friend, a regular contributor to this podcast, not as much as the 8-7-29 podcast, I would say, but my friend Glen Willis is back of Peachtree Hoops. Glen, welcome back to the show. How are you on this fine Monday?
Yeah, good, busy week here. Wife and I are trying to buy a house this week and all that, but certainly a lot of basketball stuff going on too. So having to find some balance there across all of that. But really appreciate having me back. Good to be here. Always enjoy a chance to talk with you.
A few things going on for sure. Again, we're recording this Monday afternoon, evening. If you don't follow me on Twitter, you may not know that I was not at the press conference today. I haven't a chance to watch it and listen to it, but I had dental work done. So if I sound funny or if my mouth goes crazy here, you'll know what happened. But obviously today was the introduction of Quin Snyder. I mean, honestly, and I made sure that Glen had a chance to look at at least a little bit of the video from what transpired. There wasn't a ton of news. I'm not sure if you feel the same way, Glen. Like, I wasn't expecting a lot of fireworks. I guess the only thing that's like a nuts and bolts thing is that he's going to coach on Tuesday. That's the plan. That was reported as likely, but now seems to be happening. Other than that, it was a very kind of generic, not in a bad way, but a generic press conference. It was very positive. Everybody's excited. There was even applause, which I always find funny for those things with media around at one point. Obviously, players and coaches on the scene, team personnel, etc. I wonder what you thought of that, and then we'll sort of dive into what you think about the hire itself, because that's obviously more important for our purposes here.
Yeah, I had a chance to work through it. I had to get a little creative and get some help with getting access to it, since I'm not in the Valley Sports Southeast area. Yeah. But I did finally, with some help, get my hands on it. No, I mean, pretty typical. Everyone says all the right things. Everyone's happy. The applause doesn't bother me when someone's getting a new job. It's like, I know that's not the customary way that the media interacts and stuff like that, but nothing wrong with sort of a polite, applause of congratulations on the new job kind of thing. Now, the only thing that kind of caught a little bit of my attention was when Quinn was talking about, I don't want to put too much in the players' heads. That we have some guys who have some wonderful basketball instinct. I'm paraphrasing here. And that to me was interesting, because my view, when you and I talked a little bit about this, was that Quinn is pretty intense about the details, about the fundamentals and all that sort of stuff. And I've talked, in different places about how I think it'll be interesting to see how Trey kind of engages with that style that Quinn normally has. We all grow and develop and maybe kind of handle different situations, but I thought that was Quinn kind of maybe taking a shot at the first gesture of some flexibility and some willingness to kind of collaborate around the kind of style this team needs, which is a different team than his Utah teams. So that kind of is the only thing kind of grabbed me as being so interesting and kind of meaningful from my perspective.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I wonder how much of it is also practical, because, it's been a talking point, and one that I've been sharing as well. Like, this is a very odd situation. He's coming in very late, and I think just practically, especially for the first couple games, he's not going to have any time to put anything in. Like, he's going to, he's coaching the game on Tuesday with no practice. They didn't even practice today. So he's literally going to be a head coach of a team he's never had nothing to do with putting together, and his assistants are all going to be there. I have a feeling at least he understands. While I agree with what you said about him being, he's honestly has the reputation of being very controlling and very much very focused on that kind of detail. But like I think he's going to have to at least try to let it go a little bit early on, because he's not going to be. He can't put everything in one day or even a week or 2 weeks. Like it's going to have to be a process. And I think they all know that. They're all saying the same things. But it's one of the questions that I keep getting asked is like, what's the system going to look like? And it's like, well, I know what Quinn likes to run from Utah. I wasn't covering that team every day, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit on this podcast. But it's going to have to be a hybrid for this season. I mean, there's no way around it. I can't imagine it's going to start looking like the full-on Quin Snyder system until next season. I mean, maybe at the end of this year, maybe at that point. But you don't just flip a switch. I know it's like from the outside, you may not understand the nuances of this thing, but Glenn, you're far more into the X's and O's than I am. But it feels like it's going to look like what they ran the last couple of games, more so than what the Quin Snyder offense looks like, at least for a while. It kind of has to, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's interesting to me that if you kind of watch Quinn's progression, even in Utah early on, maybe the first 1, 2, 3 years, it was a lot of like the early Bud days in Atlanta where the ball has energy, everybody touches it. We want to kind of get some touches before we get into a specific action. And then especially with the arrival of Donovan Mitchell there, he became more and more flexible offensively and allowed Donovan and empowered Donovan to be able to kind of attack if he saw leverage early in the shot clock and didn't require kind of, let's get 3 touches before we kind of get into X or Y or Z or what have you. And so I think sometimes we think about Quinn being one thing, and it's been interesting for me to kind of go back and do a little bit of kind of a review of what I've seen, some things I've captured along the way. And he really did kind of evolve in terms of how much collaboration and empowerment he gave, specifically when the offense was built around Donovan Mitchell. So I hope that evolution of his kind of sets him up to be at a good point to kind of enter this opportunity and find some balance with his teammates. And even though it was a brief statement today, I thought that was suggestive that he tends to kind of enter that role looking for some balance, which I think will be well received, I would think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's worth monitoring that entire progression and just the realization that Quin Snyder has coached a lot of different places and done a lot of things. This is not a one system guy. I think that it's just an interesting way to describe it, because it's a natural way, just like, all right, what is his system? I think that a big part of his appeal is that he's very adaptable to players, and the fact that he's not going to just impose something on the team that does not fit his style. And I think he said that today. Some of the buzz around the reporting beforehand was like just talking about how adaptable he is. And it's a great example, just as you bring up, just to watch his progression in Utah from a team that didn't have the guy early in his tenure, and they ran a much more free flowing. I described it last night as kind of like the early Bud years when they didn't have a guy, and it was a lot of motion and all that stuff. And then with Donovan, it's a lot more conventional in some ways. It's a lot more pick and roll, and that's the way you do that. And obviously they have Trey on this team, so it might look more like that than it did early on in Utah. But that's a huge part of the appeal for me anyway, in a good way, of Quin Snyder, is that he's not going to just force feed something that doesn't fit this roster. And I also noticed this is not part of the press conference, but it was actually one of sort of the package around Bally. I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but Kyle Korver did an interview with Bob Rathbun either before or after on camera. And Kyle, I mean, predictably was pretty effusive in his praise of Snyder. No surprise, but he said, I'm gonna quote Kyle here. He told Bob that Quinn is the most creative mind he'd ever come across in the NBA. Now that's not a small thing. Obviously, he now works with Quinn, so there's a little bit of grain of salt there. But Quinn was Kyle's guy, so every player has their guy they work with on the assistant staff. Quinn was the direct guy that worked with Kyle in Atlanta when he was still playing. And, for Korver, who played, 10, 15 years in the league, to say that was an eyebrow raiser in a good way. And I think, just doing some recognizance behind the scenes for people that covered Utah, especially the last few days, everybody talks about like Quinn is really, I mean, the word genius gets thrown around too much. I don't want to go all the way there, but like everyone has a lot of positive things to say about his schematic ability. And that's much more your avenue than mine. But just reputation wise, like everyone kind of just believes that Quinn sees the game differently in a good way. He seems to be very, very well respected in that avenue.
Yeah. And, posted on Twitter his kind of playoff record, which I think it's 412, I think is the percentage.
Yeah.
But in 6 years he got his team past the first round, and only once was his team a top four. It was they got the one seed one time, but all the other times they were 5 or 6, and still got to the second round 3 out of 6 times. And I think that kind of highlights I remember like a specific plays, a game they won against the Clippers, a really pivotal game they won against the Clippers, where he forewent a timeout and attacked who the Clippers kind of left on the floor, and he just different from Nate. Nate doesn't want to change a lot on the fly. Nate's really wants to focus on the basics, the fundamentals, kind of doing all those things right, and there's a lot of value in that. I don't want to spin backwards and make this a Quinn versus Nate, because it's kind of immaterial at this point, right?
It is.
But Quinn is a guy who will kind of coach on the fly more so, and I think the modern players are to a degree kind of expecting that real-time help, real-time solutions when a game isn't going well. What kind of adjustment can we make? What can we do differently, and things like that. And I think Quinn is just more oriented that way. And that's not to say that that's the most important thing for a coach to have, but it's something that's different that he has that is a contrast in some ways.
Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat this time of year, but you don't want all the fat and calories that come along with it, Built Bar is a fantastic option for you. I know one of my goals this year is to eat actually a little bit healthier this time around. If you're anything like me, taste is important to you as well. And with Built Bar, healthy is tasty. They're so delicious that you won't believe they're actually healthy and good for you as well. They have 100% real chocolate on the outside, and they come in a ton of awesome flavors. That includes peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, and my personal favorite, which is, of course, cookies and cream. Built bars taste like candy bars with 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. And you don't have to wait anymore to get a box of Built Bars. For a long time, I've been telling you to get your Built Bars at Built.com, and you still can. It's an awesome option for you. They have the whole catalog at Built Bar, and you can definitely check that out today. But if you don't want to get necessarily waiting for that package to arrive in the mail, Walmart and Sam's Club have them in stock for you right now. Walk into Walmart, get a box immediately. Walk into Sam's Club, get a 13-bar box right now of Built Bars. Make sure you check out Built Bar no matter where you want to get your Built Bars from, and dive in today. I wonder, and we can't know. I'll say this now. We can't know the answer to this, but I wonder what you think of just the logistics of how this is going to work early on. We talked about it a second ago a little bit, but we saw a couple, a giant 2-game sample size of the Joe Prunty era. But this is the same assistant staff, and I know you're very into assistant coaches like I am, and just kind of knowing what these guys do. And the dynamics are kind of unprecedented, but also I want to know almost what you saw the last 2 games. It's not going to necessarily, maybe it will. I don't know. That won't tell the story moving forward. But because of what we just said, Quinn isn't going to be able to put his stamp on things. I wonder what you saw the last 2 games. Obviously, there were 2 wins, but it's probably appropriate to look back at least at that sample size, because it wasn't Nate, and it was the guys who are still left over. Joe Prunty is going to be the lead assistant under Quinn. And I want to know if anything jumped out to you that changed even from when Nate was gone over the last 2 games, because that might actually maybe infer what we're going to see for a little while.
Yeah, and that I think you're exactly right. I think it is informative to look at these 2 games for the exact reason you laid out, that Quinn's going to have to lean on these guys and can't come in and really implement any change, in my view. But what's interesting to me is that the games were so vastly different from
they really were.
Right?
Yeah.
Against Cleveland, they ran a ton of pick and roll. The only ISO I remember was maybe 2 or 3 possessions really, really late after the Cavs started blitzing the pick and roll and forcing the ball out of Trey's hands, DeJounte's hands, whoever had it. And the Hawks kind of got into where, like, okay, we have to attack, we can't attack in the middle. And they had some ISO there. It was late. And then Brooklyn forced them into the mid-range, forced them into a lot of one-on-one because they were switching everything. And it was one of those things, like, teams that play Brooklyn down the stretch might kind of owe them a little bit of a thank you, because it is kind of some preparation for that. That's exactly the style of defense you're going to see in the postseason, where they're going to force you off the 3-point line. They're going to heavy switch and get you down in the mid-range. And, the Hawks put up 129 on a really nice shooting line, yesterday. So the Hawks tried to get in the pick and roll, but with the Nets switching it really became more about getting that matchup, It's funny, when I was watching the game yesterday, I was imagining Nate somewhere watching and kind of laughing that they were having to go
Yeah,
at
I almost made that joke just now when you said that, because it didn't really occur to me that way. But you're right. The way that sort of laid out was it was a lot of matchup ball, which is kind of what Nate's known for on offense.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was breaking down some film today. I did the late possessions yesterday, but today, and it was interesting. I found a possession in the first quarter where the Nets attacked the Hawks, got Bogey on the weak side corner. Bogey overhelped, and it created a wide open shot in the left hand corner. And then that was the play they went back to at the very, very end of the game. And it's like, I don't think that was an accident. And then I found another play I think it was late first quarter also, where Trey took Bridges one-on-one, and Trey started kind of left of center. Bridges took him totally off of the line he wanted. Trey got a terrible shot. Then at the end, they went back to Trey on Bridges, and Trey started right of center and got a really, really good line of attack. So that game Sunday was one of the, for me, a guy who loves the X's and O's and loves to go back and kind of string together an understanding of the story of the game through adjustments and tweaks, and there was so much of that on Sunday. And the game on Friday, which is the Hawks running PNR straight down the Cavs throws the whole game until the Cavs had that blitz coverage, and then the Hawks just kind of scooped out enough. So, but I mean, to me, if the Hawks had won with the exact same formula, I wouldn't be left feeling like it was quite as satisfying, because they're going to have to win games in different ways. And it was, to me, satisfying, for Hawks fans and for the team, I'm sure, to be able to go out on Friday and beat the top-ranked defense in the league, putting up all those points, and they come back. And to me, the Sunday game against the Nets was really a battle of toughness. And it became really a physical game, and each team trying to pose their will on the other, and the Hawks were able to kind of sustain that. They've not always been the toughest team, across these last few years. So for me, I thought Prunty did a phenomenal job, and his staff did a phenomenal job, and I feel sure that Quinn's going to lean a lot on him, and a lot on Longobardi as well. Longobardi was getting them in and out of their red scheme, their switching yesterday, getting them back to it when they needed to urgently get back to it, and so I think those will be the kind of guys calling a lot of the real time kind of stuff as Quinn kind of leans in and stuff. And but it was a great sample. I think it reflects well on Joe Prunty, and I know that all of the comments I've heard coming out where the people were just very appreciative and positive about the how he handled those two games, and those two games could make a big difference at the end, depending upon how the rest of the season goes.
Yeah, I mean, they were big. I mean, that's one of the things about this makes this whole thing very interesting, is that the Hawks are, of course, focused on this year still, and they're trying to win. And most of these teams that make these kind of changes are not, and it's even as dynamic there. But Prunty is very well liked. He's been around the block a long time, and even a small thing like this only matters to people like me. But his media stuff was great. I mean, he's very open. He was given very elaborate answers, and I think there's some freedom there when you're only the coach for a handful of games or a handful of days. Even like you can kind of speak and be a little bit more open. But it was certainly fun to kind of chronicle all of that. And I'm with you. They looked good. They looked to be well coached. I'm glad you mentioned Longobardi too, because I was going to ask you about Quinn on defense, because most of the attention, as I'm sure will not be surprised, is about the offense, and that's the side of the ball that people care about most. And you and I try to bang defense into the ground more than most do. But I would say 90% of the questions I've gotten about Quinn is, what's his offensive system look like? Okay, I get that. But Longobardi, to your point, he's very much been the quarterback of the defense this year. It's not even a secret. Like, they brought him in to kind of do that, and he's the guy that's up there making calls. I'm not the expert that you are on this stuff, but like, they go to him when they're changing things, and he's the one calling out schemes. And I'd imagine that probably continues. We'll see if anything sort of changes overall. But I wonder, I'm sure you have, because you're you, but I wonder what you thought about the defense and like what kind of might get implemented there, because Quinn had some personnel challenges in Utah. He also had Rudy Gobert, who's the ultimate weapon defensively, but they also had some perimeter issues at times, and they had a very specific scheme they ran because they have Rudy, which gives them some freedom. The Hawks don't have that necessarily, but they have a facsimile in Clint. They have other stuff there, and I wonder what you thought about the defense so far, because that's the area that I think has been discussed far less than the offense.
Yeah, it's fascinating because they ran their switching scheme, which they call red, almost the whole game, but they got out of it off and on. And Longobardi was really vocal getting them back into it. and that getting in and out of it, I think, was mostly built around when in the third quarter, especially Brooklyn was really targeting Trey.
Yeah.
And this year the Hawks have been largely successful, really help. First of all, Trey initiating help to get him out of a bad spot, and then his teammates helping him get out of a bad spot. But they struggled in the third quarter, and that I thought that was one of the primary factors. Brooklyn kind of really got all the way back to basically a tie game, right? After the Hawks had a pretty nice lead early in the early going, and they kind of got in and out trying to help around that. And when they got back to it finally, they did a better job of kind of keeping him out of bad spots. But so against Cleveland, it was really more around ball pressure and forcing Cleveland to try to play through Allen and Mobley, who are both capable guys. But when you're facing a team that has Garland and Donovan Mitchell, you're winning any possession where those bigs have to create, kind of the shot, things like that. So that was more force the ball out of their hands. They were switching all the lifting action from the corners, which was not all the red heavy switching we saw against the Nets. They were the switching actions that was lifting guards and wings up the floor. And then against the Nets, it was basically they were switching just like the Nets the whole game, basically, except for those exceptions that I noted. And when I go back to what Quinn ran in Utah, the way he leveraged Rudy and set up his techniques was funnel everything to Rudy. That really reminds me of the Hawks team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals a few years ago, because they had Gallo and Bogey and some other challenges as well. And it was funnel everything to Clint, and Clint was amazing during that run. Clint's not quite that guy anymore. Clint is 2 years older and a little bit more tread, and stuff like that. But that's one reason Okongwu played like almost 17 straight minutes, I think, to close the game. And with all the switching, he was really good, yesterday. And so I think what I'm going to expect from Quinn is more of when we're dropping more minutes for Clint, when we're getting near the level of the screen, but not all the way to the level of the screen, a more equal distribution between Clint and Okongwu. When we're switching and other teams are going small, I think we're going to, like we did yesterday, see potentially Okongwu logging more minutes than Clint. And I think that flexibility and that versatility is going to be huge. And I think that Quinn, in collaboration with Longobardi, is going to continue to have kind of that flexibility with what the scheme and the matchup kind of dictates that they have. And I'm, so excited what I've seen from Okongwu the last 12, 15 games. I feel like we've seen this level of play before in kind of samples and, in patches and things, but the last 12 to 15 games or so, he's hit a level of consistency he's never had before. And I think if the Hawks are going to kind of really do something, exceed our expectations potentially this year, it's going to be their defensive play that really kind of dictates that. They seem to have recovered kind of a top 5 offense finally. And so if they can get that defensive play up, then maybe they will be dangerous, come, the postseason, wherever they end up landing. But I think that it'll be a mix of things like they've always had. I think a lot of teams might start trying to play smaller and smaller and smaller against the Hawks, and because the Hawks traditionally struggle to rebound when Clint's not on the floor,
Yeah.
And so I think it'll be matchup based, but I think that versatility is something that they'll lean on. And I think that Quinn will work with Longobardi to kind of get that mix the way they want it.
Yeah, I agree, and I still think, and I'm not saying you're saying otherwise. I still think that you're going to see Clint more often than not outpace Okongwu in minutes. But last night was a great example of a game where it made total sense to just go with Okongwu. It doesn't mean that Okongwu is better than Clint now or anything like that. It's just a matchup thing. They're very, very different players, and using those strengths is important. But I mean, honestly, I agree with you on Okongwu. The big thing, this is more of a future facing thing that we could save for much later in the process. But if he's playing like this the rest of the season, they're going to have to look at trading Clint at the end of the year, and that was already going to be the case anyway. Yeah. But it's just one of those things. One of the reasons why they have not done that yet is that Okongwu hadn't had the half season stretch where he's played at that level to just force their hand and say, all right, it's time. Obviously, there are other reasons beyond that. Trey and Clint have great chemistry. They just really value Clint. He's still a very valuable player. But that's just one of those down the road things that makes sense. But I was going to ask you actually about, Quinn early in his tenure, especially. They had Favors and Gobert playing together a lot. And I wonder if that in sort of infers anything because, the Hawks don't have, Collins is not Derek Favors big, but he's a more traditional four than most guys. And then even Jalen Johnson, again, not a traditional guy like Derek Favors, but has size like that. Like the Hawks have these two traditional big alignments that they could go to. Some teams are shifting small, and you have options to do that. If they want to play Hunter at the 4 or Sadiq Bey at the 4, they can do that. But Snyder has history of being able to make it work with two bigs. And I know one of the things that was out there, I know our friend Andrew Kelly floated this too about maybe this is a good thing for Collins because Quinn's had that the ability in the past to kind of like get him maybe going again the way that I know you and I really like Collins still and really value him. But the offensive role has diminished this year and all that stuff. I wonder what you think about just the ability to kind of be malleable, but also just the reality of having, they have these two power forwards in Collins and Jalen, who are very different players, but they're both kind of traditional size power forwards versus the small ball, combo forward type.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if Quinn can unlock some of that. And it's funny because like the first 5, 6, 7 games of the year, we actually saw a number of plays where both Clint and JC were diving at the same time from each kind of angle for the 3-point break. And that went away. I thought that was interesting. Another option is kind of, do they trust John to function in the short roll? That gives him some space to work with where Clint is maybe in the dunker spot. And so there's a number of things that you could see there. Favors was never the guy they trusted in the short roll, but they kind of found a way to kind of make it work. But they buried Rudy in the dunker spot a lot to make
all the time.
And that's not something teams really the last five years or so haven't seen the value in that so much.
It's also just a different league now. I mean, it's a much faster, smaller league than it was even 5 years ago. I mean, it feels like that's not that long of a time. Right. But how many teams really do what the Jazz were doing then on offense? It's a pretty small number, at least in main lineups.
So like imagine JC on the left block, Clint on the right baseline, that kind of setup. JC wanting to turn middle, he has a natural kind of right-handed passing angle to Clint. If the help comes from the baseline side, that's workable. But again, that's becoming obsolete, sort of. Or JC loves the right baseline with that inside pivot that he has. And Clint on the left baseline, toughing for JC. And you're going to need motion kind of up top to kind of occupy defenders to kind of create space lower on the floor. And so that'll be one of the first thing I look for in the game 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever number is. Do we start to see a little bit more touches for JC kind of in that setup, or not? Do we see JC playing with a Koglu kind of more as a spot up shooter and JC getting more reps in the pick and roll? And I don't think necessarily the goal will be let's go away from a Koglu in the pick and roll to JC, but if JC has a defender on him that is more desirable to have put into the pick and roll to kind of go that route, and a Koglu's kind of emerging set shot, I think kind of helps with that as well. So that's a great call out in terms of something to kind of watch in the first handful of games that we have there is, and Andrew, I think hit on that exactly right. Something to watch for sure.
Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, success in 2023 is all dependent on the members that you surround yourself with on your team. That's why LinkedIn Jobs is the best option for you in the hiring process. That can help you find the qualified candidates that you're looking for more efficiently, matching open roles with people who have the skills, the values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals this year. I've used them a few times to hire in the past. It's proven to be an awesome resource and makes the entire hiring process both easy and painless. They help you to attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools, and then make it easy to screen applicants based on your job qualifications, all in one platform. LinkedIn Jobs goes beyond the resume data by using insights from your job post, your company, and their millions of profiles to put your post in front of the people that you actually want to be looking at it quickly, and they help you to do it for free. They're also rated at LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires with leading competitors. At LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the most qualified candidates you're looking for, and they help you to do it faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Terms and conditions apply. I think a lot of the focus, again, not to go back to the offense too much, but we can. I mean, it's probably okay to do that. It's going to be on Trey and DeJounte and what that looks like now. And what, obviously the national storyline is going to be how does Trae Young work with Quin Snyder? That's already been out there the last 3 days. It is what it is. It's going to happen.
I put it out there myself even.
Well, it's a real story. I mean, it's a real story,
Right.
but you know what I mean? That's the only story nationally is how it's
Right.
going to work with Trae. And that does matter. But like I would, one of the things I have said a lot, and it's a little bit simplistic, but I think it's true, is that Nate would not have been the guy that I would have chosen in a vacuum to implement an offense with Trey and DeJounte and put those guys together. Quinn's done it a little bit more. He had Conley and Mitchell together at the end in Utah. That's a little bit similar, not exactly the same, but similar. And I just wonder like what that might look like now, and we're all speculating on that. But it's like that pairing has been pretty good when they play together. It's not like it's been bad by any means, but I wonder if we'll see any tweaks. And I have a feeling you thought about this in the last couple of days. What like even anything small that we might look for, because it seems like DeJounte has been the guy who's really catered his game more, which is kind of expected.
Right.
He's been the one that changed things. He's taking more spot up threes. He's doing that stuff. They still, there's also the broad question of like, do we see less mid-rangers in general under Quin Snyder? That's a very natural question to ask, but I wonder what you think about like what impact this might have. Maybe not short term, but as we get going into next year and beyond.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. What I remember from those Utah teams is that when the ball rotated to the weak side, they wanted to attack that space that was created quickly. And I remember having a conversation with you early in the season, maybe even before the season, about how creating leverage on the strong side, which creates a seam on the weak side, swing the ball, attack that seam. And DeJounte just instinctively kind of wants to get his defender in front of him and kind of get him moving. And that's just what DeJounte's instinct, it seems to be. So I do wonder if Quinn will start emphasizing go, attack that space. And maybe that's more something like Saddiq Bey is really good about, kind of pressing the seam, kind of getting to the rim, getting the free throw line and things like that. Maybe pushing Hunter a little bit to be more decisive, kind of in that situation. And how much does he push DeJounte towards that? If that again, that's like he doesn't want to. Quinn said in the press conference today, I don't want to push guys. I don't want to fill their heads up with things that end up kind of working against their instincts. And so that was the thing. Like Joe Ingles was probably maybe my favorite storyline from the Quinn time in Utah was Joe Ingles going from being cut by the Clippers to, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later defending Chris Paul in clutch time in the playoffs really well.
And shooting like 48% from three that year too, something stupid like that. Yeah.
But I mean, when Joe Ingles would catch the ball on the weak side, it was, if his guy was closing out Joe Ingles, even though he's not the fastest guy in the league at all, driving past this guy, creating more leverage, driving kick or drive, and so it's more of that, see the space, see the seam, see the defender recovering from the strong side back out or recovering from the middle back out and attack that more aggressively. Quinn's teams are always super aggressive attacking the space and the leverage on the weak side, where the Hawks just really haven't been doing that. So that's the one thing. And how did Trey and DeJounte kind of fit into that? That's not perfect, in terms of the kind of player you would drop into that, but there's still, I'm sure, Quinn is already thinking of things that I don't think of in terms of ways to use their specific skills and abilities to do that. But in my mind, I do think Trey and DeJounte have been good, but I don't know about you, but I still feel like they're not fully capitalizing on what's possible, right?
Yeah,
and maybe Quinn can kind of help get them further along around more optimization and capitalizing more on what the duo kind of presents defenses. And to me, that's about being more aggressive in when you have leverage on the defense. But I'm sure Quinn has like 1,000 ideas already, and
I'm sure he does. Yes.
Which 4 or 5 do I go after early? And I can't wait to see what that looks like.
Yeah, and he's been open already, even in his interviews about how like he's going to have to watch more, and he's said that like I need to watch these guys more and kind of have that knowledge base built up. I'm sure he's watched some Hawks in the last few weeks or whatever, but the last few days especially. But he doesn't have his full thought process done either. It's like he's got to see more of that. And it's such a weird thing. Every time I do anything that's like an out of market radio hit or something like that, I did a national radio hit this week, and it was like, okay, what do you make of Trey and DeJounte, how they played so far this year? It's such a nuanced discussion because on one hand, I agree with you, it's not fully formed, and there's so much more they could be doing with those guys. On the other hand, it hasn't been bad at all. Like, it's been fine. The numbers say it's fine. They seem to be getting along fine, generally speaking. DeJounte's numbers look fine. Trey's numbers, now that he's starting to make some shots after the first month of the season, look fine. So it's not bad. It's just not quite all the way there yet. I'm sure Snyder knows that. I'm sure the team knows that. They probably know that there's more there. And, they're the duo to circle, but you mentioned Hunter in there. That's a guy I'm circling. Collins is a natural one too, but I want to know what Hunter looks like in 2 months, like what they're going to ask of him, because famously, he's not the fastest processor on offense. He kind of likes to, he's a hold guy. Murray, you talked about Murray being kind of an exam of the defense, get your guy in front of you. Hunter's the same way. He's never been a super reactive guy. And I wonder if he's going to take more threes, and B, also maybe just like be more decisive attacking. And, maybe they won't encourage DeAndre to do as many of his, ISO one dribble pull-ups that he's been doing for a while. So that's a guy to look at. I mean, there's lots of guys. We could talk, you and I could talk about this for 2 hours. It's just one of those things, like, I have a checklist of things, and I want to know, Jalen Johnson's on it, AJ Griffin's on it. Like, yep. Is there anybody you're thinking about, like, player-wise? We can go, if it's Trey, then talk about Trey, but even beyond the big names, like, is there somebody that you're looking for and circling to, like, really keep an eye on the next couple of weeks, just to see how, like, what's changing and how they're being used? Or even long-term, like, because clearly I have to remind myself, like, this is really still more of a long-term thing. This year is going to matter. They're going to try this year to win, but a lot of these questions won't be answered until next year, basically, for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, to start with DeAndre, one thing I think we've seen Quinn do is if there's something Quinn wants a specific player to really focus on, the first 1, 2, 3 possessions of the game, they'll run specific action to get him to do that early. And that way that player is prepared for, okay, the first 2 or 3 possessions I'm going to get opportunities to. And for me, I think with DeAndre, more than backing up behind the line a little bit more often, the one dribble pull up doesn't bother me inside the line. He's a great mid-range shooter. There are times he passes on an opportunity to get a good 3 up, but overall it doesn't bother me. I think for DeAndre, it's when you're big and strong and long, like, get to the rim, and yesterday, like, exact point, like 2 times on their first, I think, 3 possessions, DeAndre went to the hole, got to the free throw line, and so I wonder if it's going to be kind of maybe more of that with AJ. AJ hasn't played a lot since in these 2 games,
Yeah, I noticed that too. I mean, and maybe, we've all focused on, not to cut you off, we all focused on Jalen Johnson with regard to Saddiq Bey, and especially because Jalen didn't play that first game, and it was like, oh, what's going on here? But inevitably, if they trust Saddiq Bey as a more veteran guy, like, Hunter got in foul trouble in that game, and they went to Saddiq at the 3 rather than going to AJ. They could have gone to more AJ. They didn't do that. So I wonder, obviously this could be a different staff now, but also it's the same staff. Prunty and those guys, like, Saddiq Bey is more of a veteran. And I think that Griffin is a much better prospect than Saddiq Bey, but they might just think that Sadiq's better right now. And that wouldn't be, like, totally out of line.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. And against the Cavs, I got it, because going up against Garland and Mitchell, like, getting AJ switched on the other one of those guys, AJ's just, even though he's improved his on-ball defense, he's just not ready to kind of really deal with that. So I understood that. And then yesterday they were switching a ton, like rapid switching. I put a possession on Twitter today where they were defending Spain, and there were literally 6 switches in about 3 seconds.
Did they switch more yesterday than they have in any game this season? I wonder if you thought that.
I think so.
Because it felt like it to me.
Yeah, because it's not just ball screens. They were switching off ball. Like, I remember one time Trey got caught in a 1-5 pick and roll, and he got caught on Finney-Smith, who was playing the 5. Jalen came in and collected Finney-Smith from Trey and kicked Trey out. Jalen did a great job on that possession, recognizing he needed to get Trey out of the middle. And so there was, if we're counting the switches away from the ball screens, that had to be the most in my view. I think it's a great question. But the key, I think the whole key for AJ is, what are they going to try to do defensively, and does he fit that? That's something I'm watching. In my mind, Jalen has to play. That's just where I am. I'm not coming off.
We agree.
Yeah. and that's where more of the kind of the playmaking for there was a stretch of time where, Joe Johnson went back to, Utah, right? And they tried, some Rudy Gay. They kind of were seeking some of that kind of along the way. And I think Rudy is probably the best replica for what Quinn was trying to find there to give them something there. Eventually, like they started playing Joe Ingles at the four, quite a lot, And so I do think there's some stuff where Jalen fits that playmaking four that we saw the Utah trying to kind of find and discover, not to build around necessarily the starting unit or the most heavily used 5-man lineup, but as an option and as a tweak. So I'm hoping there's kind of something there. Jalen's just been too good this year in my mind to not play, but that's a whole nother conversation.
No, and you're right. You're right. And also, I mean, I will say what happened on Sunday didn't bother me with Jalen. They played him in the first half.
Yeah.
And I'm okay if they think that, okay, second half, we're gonna trip it down a little bit. That didn't bother me at all. Like, I would have been fine if he played more, but as long as you play him in every game and that's your plan, and there's a 10-minute, if everybody's healthy, it's 10 guys, all 10 guys should play. I honestly, I would lean more to Jalen than Saddiq Bey in a vacuum. And that doesn't mean Saddiq Bey is bad. I just think that Saddiq Bey's defense is not fantastic. And they're very different players, obviously, but they're competing for the same minutes in a lot of ways. They're playing, when they go to Saddiq, they're playing him some at 3, some at 4. I would be at least big picture leaning toward trying to have Jalen play a little more of those minutes. But I get why you wouldn't too. So it's kind of that ultimate, and this is where Quinn's imprint might come in. Maybe he has opinions in the next couple of weeks about, like, okay, maybe he doesn't see it with Saddiq Bey, or maybe he doesn't see it with Jalen. That's possible too. And they just kind of trim it down. And but I think long term, clearly Jalen's upside. I think there's some takes about it like they're pretty crazy. I got someone asked me with a straight face this week. I'm not picking that person, by the way. They were like, "This is the mini LeBron we all were expecting," and it's like, mini LeBron. I'm not gonna do that with Jalen Johnson. But I like Jalen a lot. We agree he should play, and it seems pretty natural. They have 10 guys, and they should just play 10 guys and mix and match. I mean, Nate is pretty rigid, and not always in a bad way, but sometimes in a frustrating way. But they have 10 guys, and like, there's nothing wrong with, especially in second halves, tinkering. And they did that a little bit, honestly, with Prunty on Sunday. Like they wrote a Kongwu. John was limited, which is part of the reason why this happened. But they did that. They went to more of Bay than usual. Bogey played really, really well, but also limited minutes, because that's another guy to like keep him fresh, and he looks great right now. And cross your fingers on that, because Bogey is huge and unlocking a lot of stuff for them. I don't know. There's just so much stuff to talk about, but it's I thought Sunday was fascinating for a lot of ways, but just a combination of like all of the rotation stuff. I think everybody agrees that they have 10 guys, and how they use the 10 guys is interesting.
Yeah, don't play Bogey 37 minutes. That's probably my number one thing, right?
Well, and even honestly, in a very competitive game, Trey and DeJounte played 33 and 34 minutes.
Right.
And with Nate, I'm not picking on it, but like that would have been 37 and 38, you would imagine, for those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a small thing, but that's 8 minutes right there that you didn't play those guys.
Yeah. And then the other thing from the Sunday game is DeAndre wasn't very good defensively yesterday.
He was out of rhythm the whole game, I thought. Just the foul trouble and everything. He just wasn't very
good. But the thing is like, typically when they played him at the 4, I'll put that in air quotes, and Bogey, Bogey often plays the 4 on defense, and DeAndre stays on the ball handlers more on defense. Yesterday, they played him with Bay quite a bit, and Bay played the 3, and DeAndre went to the 4. And the heavy switching scheme, it seemed like something that was fairly, and they haven't done that a lot, like throw him at the 4 and then switch a ton. And so they're going to have to, whatever the plan might be, if there's an adjustment to how much Jalen plays or doesn't play, if there's an adjustment to what position City plays on defense, around all of those things, Jalen's role, how that fits, does he play with Jalen or not? Does he play with Bogey? Do they, and so that's another thing to kind of keep an eye on, is to help him get kind of resettled defensively, because they need him on ball. They need him at the point of attack. And if you're going to go to that much switching, you're kind of eroding a lot of his defensive value. Now, when he plays at the 4 in a more traditional kind of scheme, he's an awesome interior helper from the weak side, but if they're switch, I think you're kind of going away from doing things that set DeAndre up. Now, that's not a higher priority than setting the team up for success, obviously.
Of course.
I think there's something to do there with DeAndre defensively to kind of get him settled back into a role where he's set up for success, or if it's a change, just to help him through that change so we can kind of go back to kind of making the impact, because it was a struggle for him on Sunday.
And I do wonder, I know we're talking about that's the most recent game on Sunday. I don't know if there's many opponents that the Hawks will treat that same way. I think Brooklyn is a pretty interesting case right now. They basically play one big, and it's Nick Claxton, who's a very athletic, rangy big. They don't really have a lot of size, but they have a lot of like wings, basically wing size guys. I don't know if the Hawks will use that deployment a lot. Maybe they will. Maybe that'll be more of what we see now. I'm not sure, but it might have just been that particular opponent, and that is at least worth acknowledging, because I was thinking about that during the game, and I'm like, I wonder if they're going to play this way. And then I'm thinking this Nets team is like kind of pretty much set up to play this way in a way that a lot of teams won't be. So I'm not sure if that's indicative or not.
You'll see some of that from the Raptors. They have one more game with the Pacers, and the Pacers play really small a lot. Apart in the Eastern Conference, at least, I can't really think of anyone else. And I think they're done with Toronto. So, and one more with India, just going off memory, and so that's all I can think of. I know with the Charlotte post Plumlee, when Williams comes off the floor, they're playing a lot smaller, but they're done with Charlotte. so I don't think they have a lot left on the schedule until potentially a postseason matchup puts them into a play-in with Toronto or whatever it might look, or Indy or whatever. Hopefully for their sake they do better than play-in, but we'll see. But I think that last Indy game is the only one I think that might look a little bit like this game did.
Yeah, and not to do a full-on preview at the end of this conversation, but the Hawks do play the Wizards 4 times in the final 21 games of the season, which starts mercifully finally on Tuesday. It's very weird to have a divisional opponent that they haven't played so far, which means they have to play them 4 more times. The Wizards are kind of a weird team, and Porzingis is doubtful, so I'm assuming he won't play, which changes things for them. I know you watch the whole league. Do you have any thoughts about what a Wizards game looks like on Tuesday, acknowledging that Quinn will be the coach, and going back to that, like, I can't imagine he's going to have much input on the game plan necessarily for the Wizards,
right.
But just broadly speaking, because we're going to see, this is a situation where literally a fifth of the games remaining are against the Wizards. So what do you make of that?
A lot to me, when I think about the Wizards, I think a lot comes down to who's playing center for them. Like, Gafford is really foul prone. Porzingis, if he was playing with the time he has at the 5, still struggles a little bit, kind of the physicality of being on the interior, and you can kind of keep going from there. So I think you attack the rim as much as you can. Gafford is a good physical presence inside, but like I said, he fouls a lot. So, and then Kuzma, I know Hawks fans talked a lot about Kuzma this year around, could there be a JC for Kuzma? Kuzma is just not the help defender of the weak side kind of helper that you'd want at the 4. He's a better defender. He's worked hard to become a better defender, but he's still below average for the position. But they will play fast. They will play fast and, challenge your principles and fundamentals around transition defense. They will, stretch the floor with, shooters. And so it's sort of like, it reminds me a little bit, not quite the same, but like when the Hawks just were not prepared for Indiana's pace and they got beat by this team that everyone felt like, despite Indiana's record, almost the whole season has kind of been right around where the Hawks record has been, and so I just think you have to be prepared for what they try to do stylistically. The best thing you can do against a team like that is attack the rim, make shots, set your defense, go from there. And I think that's what it'll kind of, that's the keys to start the game, at least for me there.
I watched a little bit of Wizards Bulls yesterday, not live, but after, just knowing that the Hawks were going to play them. They basically played, I think, the entire game or close to it with either Gafford or Taj Gibson at center. Taj Gibson still kicking around. Yeah. And again, that's without Porzingis, who I don't think is going to play in this game either. Yeah. And, the Wizards, they've been so weird this season. Beyond that, they keep going on this, like, they'll win 5 in a row and then lose 5 in a row, and all year long. It's basically they alternate just being good and not good back to back, and that leads them to being, I think they're 28 and 32 right now. I don't have a lot of scheme observations to get to, but they have some talent. This will have Beal and Kuzma, et cetera. But it's a roster where the Hawks will have the more talented team. The Hawks will be at home. at least for this first matchup. And this is a game that like you just need to take care of business and win. Like it doesn't mean it's a game that would be like the worst loss in the history of the world if you lose it. But like the Wizards are trying. That's notable. They're trying to be a play-in team and all that. But I think just my simple observation would be the Hawks are going to be favored considerably. I would imagine. I'm looking this up right now. No line. Oh, there is a line. FanDuel has the Hawks -6, which is essentially the same line as the Brooklyn game. I would be. I'd actually make this. This is a game that I believe is a little bit easier than the Brooklyn game, personally.
Yeah, agree. And the Wizards like are different. So you kind of put this. They're a different experience. Like you'll watch them at one point and they're trying to do some serious stuff with Denny, right? And then you'll watch them another time and they're not. They don't care if Denny gets a touch or not. And you'll come back and like they'll be running floppy for Kispert, and then you'll come back 3 weeks later and like
they're not the Wizards. They're such a weird team. I mean, I'm excited to see DeLon Wright. I know you have a mutual admiration like I do for DeLon. Yeah. He's probably going to start. I mean, he might start for them. I mean, Monty Morris is questionable, and DeLon started the last game without him. So we'll see DeLon. That's always a highlight for me. But the Wizards are they're such a shrug team for me. I don't even know what to make.
It is funny to me, like with a team having both DeLon and Monty. Like, how are you not decked out Wizards gear right now? Because I
love them both, but it's the rest of the team. Like, it's not even it's not even that I don't like that. I like Denny too. I like Corey Kispert. Like, I think Kyle Kuzma's come a long way. I'm not the biggest fan, but I used to really not like him, and now I think he's pretty decent. He's a pretty good player. It's just that they're just kind of blah. Like they're from organizationally, they just like try to be that way. I think they're trying to be the 10th seed every year. It's just it's a bold approach.
Yeah, they are, in my mind, they are kind of transitioning to, and they're kind of in the lab around what do we do with Porzingis? Like, how do we build around him as a primary guy, or is he more of kind of a supporting guy? What do we have there? What does Bill look like with Porzingis? And so they're just, I think they're trying a lot of different things, which is why they look so different from week to week or month to month or whenever you happen to be able to catch them. But I think they're going to have a vastly different roster next year than this year. And then, are they on the brink where they could okay, let's shut down Kristaps and let's see how many ping pong balls we can get us if we can get, the French kid, so
he'd be pretty
who knows? Yeah. Who knows the rest of the way, kind of what their priority is going to be. And knowing them, it might change week to week along the way too, just because they're just, it's hard to pin down exactly kind of what they're about right now.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. And a game the Hawks will be favored in, and a pretty good chance to go to a three game winning streak and start the Quin Snyder era on a positive note. Glenn, we could talk forever. I have other stuff that on my notes, but we've already gone probably too long at this point in time. So please share with folks how they can find your work. I always praise you, and I'll do it with you on the show. Your X's and O stuff is completely invaluable. And also you and Kevin do a great job too on the podcast side. Don't tell them I said that. I actually joined you guys the other day, which was fun.
That was a huge surprise for me. It was a lot of fun. And I think it was fun for listeners too. I think in any case, maybe this probably shows up in how you prepare for your guest rotation, all that sort of stuff, is kind of trying to balance the normal voices and the consistency with some fresh kind of voice as well. So it was, you added a lot to that conversation. I always love talking with you anyway, but it was great. But yeah, on Twitter, you can see it there. If you're on YouTube, at Willis_Glenn, that's the best way to kind of find my work. I'm not writing as much at Peachtree Hoops, but I try to put something out, now and then. My day job is a lot busier than it was a couple of years ago, which is for good reasons, good stuff there. But yeah, find me on Twitter, and you can basically find anything that's going to kind of come out from me there. Please do follow Peachtree Hoops, support the team there. They're doing great work over there still. Our fearless leader, Zach, is, leading us through another season where I think we're putting out great content there. So support those guys too.
Definitely. I have great affection for that particular website, having been there as a writer and running the place and all that stuff. So agreed on that. And if you're not following Glenn on Twitter, I don't really know what you're doing. If you're a Hawks fan, I'll just say that plainly. So go ahead and do that if you have not done that to this point. And thank you again, my friend, for joining me. I will, I'm sure, bug you to do this again in the near future, especially when we have some actual data on Quin Snyder. But for now, it was fun to speculate with you.
Absolutely. Good to be back. Always good to chat with you, and I look forward to next time.
As for everybody else, please subscribe to this show as well, and we'll see you after the game on Tuesday.